Hey there, Mike Dunn, Editor-in-Chief of Tabletop, and I've got something very special to tell you about. It's a new crowdfunding campaign from GUICube. It's called The Tomb of Gyzengax. It's a tribute to Gary Gygax and many of the legends that created the wonderful game that we all love to play. The link is right down here. Go hit it up, back it. You can't go wrong.
We do a lot of tabletop gaming here at GamingTrend, and well, there's nothing better to enhance your tabletop experience than a 3D printer. They can do so much more than that, and large format printers are getting more popular and now a little bit smaller. The team at Elegoo have taken their Neptune and, well, micro-sized it, and also brought the price down. Today we're going to take a look at the Jupiter SE, the newest device from Elegoo. I'm Ron Burke, Editor-in-Chief for GamingTrend.com. Let's unbox this thing and see what's inside. Now, I did say that they made this printer smaller, and you wouldn't know it from me peeking over the top of it. I'm going to lower my desk here. Can't recommend FlexiSpot desks enough for this. So I can actually unbox this thing. This device is actually half the weight, and it's significantly smaller than their full-size Jupiter, but with the same exact build volume. So I'm really excited to see what we can pull out of this thing and kind of compare it against the other Elegoo device, which I have, which is a Saturn 2. So let me grab a knife, let's crack it open. Getting out of the box is a daunting task. Now we'll get the plastic off. I think we should be good. I'm going to pause for a second because I'm sure that the noise that's coming off of this plastic when I take it off is going to be horrifying. So one sec. I went ahead and set aside the printer for just a second so we can take a look at some of the things that are in the box. I pulled those out already. There are a couple of new features that you'll immediately notice. First and foremost, the acrylic hood. They did stick with acrylic on this. I believe the larger Jupiter has a glass opening that is basically like an opening door in the front. This sticks with the acrylic hood system that we have on things like the Saturn. So now we have handles. I've personally bought handles and stuck them to the thing. Now we've got proper handles. We'll go ahead and get those screwed on in a minute. This has a resin fill automatic feeder. So these little prongs here are going to stick down into the resin vat, and it's going to detect when it's low on resin, and it's going to feed resin to the device so you don't run out of resin, which is part of this over here. These go inside your resin bottles. They just screw into the top like so, and then they plug into the device, and you'll have an automatic feeding system. I do know already in advance that this works both forward and backwards, so when you need to drain this vat, this is a very large vat, the last thing you want to do is try and be holding a funnel and a resin container and trying to lift that large of a vat and dump it in. So with this, you can reverse flow and you can have it drain at least most of the resin out of that vat and back into your bottle without ever having to pull that tray. And then to get the rest, having used something similar to this in the past, you'll simply lift the resin tray so it then detects that there's still more resin in there, and it'll siphon out the bulk of it. So the last part that you have is very minimal. So it's a very good system. I'm very glad to see this added. That is a huge win. If you've ever had to level a plate, which that's every single time we have a build failure, then you'll appreciate not having to drain that large of a vat by hand. There is the Jupiter SE instruction manual. These are actually more important than you might think. It's going to give you the assembly instructions. It's also going to remind you to wear a mask. We really don't know long-term the effects of resin on our lungs, but anything that could potentially hurt your lungs, wear a mask every time. And as a general rule, I'll say this up front, always assume that everything is contaminated. Always. Wear gloves every time. Doesn't matter how clean you think it is. If you ever think you've perfectly cleaned your station, pull out a black light and you'll find out differently. Assume everything is always contaminated. Change your gloves frequently. Just a good rule of thumb. I personally don't have any sort of reaction to resin, but some people have horrific reactions. Maybe don't find out whether you're which camp you're in by just simply changing your gloves frequently. Manual, this is going to walk you through your setup. It's also going to walk you through how to level your plate, how to set up all of your your resin configurations, everything in here, actually very important. This leveling card, the Jupiter SE actually had the leveling instructions on the leveling card, which is a bad idea considering the fact that this thing is going to get filthy at some point and you're going to throw it away. I don't know what the magic number is for my Saturn 2. It's 2 sheets of paper is equivalent to this piece of cardboard. So we'll figure out what that is because at some point this is going to be too gross to use. But they do give you this leveling card and it simply says leveling card, and I'm assuming leveling card in Chinese. So you've got that at least to start with. Also in here, there's a standard power cable, nothing special. It doesn't require the brick like the Jupiter SE did. Or I'm sorry, the Saturn 2 did. That had a separate brick and a small Canon plug. This uses as basic a plug as we've ever seen. I mean, this is pretty much, I think I have 1 million of these. You build a computer or two, you're gonna have spares of these. Moving on to the build plate. This, like I said, is the same build size as the full-size Jupiter. I will get the exact dimensions here. Just a moment. Not in here. They're right here. So that's the same size as the full-size Jupiter. I know that the build volume for height is 300 millimeters. I'm not sure on the other two distances. But we do have this kind of checkerboard or, I don't know, triangular pattern in here. A lot of people just simply scuff up their plate with sanding paper. So we'll have to see how effective this is. At some point, if this is not effective, I am going to get something like a wham bam plate. I probably will end up doing that anyway. A flexible plate is really useful because, I mean, sometimes you don't even have to actually pull the plate. You can just slide your prints right off. But those flexible plates, you can just pop all your prints right off. Super helpful, especially with really small prints. I've seen some horrific results where people have inattentively kind of hacked at their plate and accidentally, you know, holding it this way or something, stabbed themselves with their own scraping device. So don't be that person. Be very careful when getting things off the plate, and also you might consider something like a flexible build plate. I do know that because this is the same size build plate as the previous Jupiter, there are a ton of plates already out there. Just use the ones that are for the full-size Jupiter, and you'll be safe on this one as well. This does have a 4-screw leveling system, which is new. So these 4 screws here are going to be what levels your build plate. You can see you can move those up and down and back and forth, I'm assuming. So we'll have to see when we start to level this how that works, but that is the build plate. Inside the toolkit, I imagine it's going to be similar to the previous toolkit. Yep, it is. So you have a set of gloves. You want, I think it's non-nitrile gloves. You don't want ones that have the powder on them. The last thing you want is powder on your plates or powder on your resin. But they do give you a set of gloves. That's very kind of them. Oh, I spoke too soon. There it is. There's the giant brick. All right, so this one does have a brick and a Canon plug. It would be nice if we could get away from this, but it seems like this is kind of what we're stuck with for now. There's probably a cost component to that. Keep this nearby. This is your spare screws and various locking plate pieces, and also the Allen wrenches that you'll need to tighten everything. They do give you these. These are strainers. Unless you don't have a strainer, or I should say a funnel with a strainer, you really don't want to use these. I mean, just imagine trying to hold, like I said, a resin vat that big, plus the container, plus this flimsy little piece of paper. How fast are you going to have a spill? I don't recommend these. It's nice that they include them. Throw them in the trash. Same thing with these. It's nice that they include these little masks. You need a full respirator. These are not going to do much of anything. I do appreciate these though. They give you a nice little scraper for your build plate, and this is actually pretty decent. Nice little rubber handle so you can stay connected to the scraper without sliding off. If it were plastic, there's a chance you could slip off if you had slippery fingers from resin or whatever else. We do include these. So these are a charcoal replaceable filter. They're USB. There's going to be a USB port in the back, both for this and also for this. So you can plug this in and it will run activated charcoal to try and pull some of those toxins, those VOCs, from the inside of the build and try and prevent it from leaking to the rest of the room. On the back of this, I'll just flip this around. There we go, a little easier to see. On the back, you can see that we have an outport exhaust fan port. So if you want to put in some sort of exhaust system that can pull those VOCs away from this device and towards something that'll vent it out a window, that's exactly what this is for. There are full-size systems. Elegoo sells one, they sell a mini one, and then they sell a large one that will do the same thing without needing all of the extra pieces. I've not personally used that. Maybe one day I'll be able to get one of those in my hands and be able to try it for myself. But that's really for venting out your VOCs. Also included the box, little plastic scraper. This is what you're gonna use, well, they include this to use inside your vat. I have a better suggestion than this, but we'll get to that when I get this in my other room. This is not where I do my printing, so we're gonna move all of this in another room in just a minute. We're gonna take a look inside the device in just a moment, and then we'll move it to where it'll actually do its printing jobs. Now, before we get under the hood, so to speak, you'll notice that there is this new venting system in the back. Now, that angled vent is brand new to the Jupiter series. And what that does has nothing to do with what's going on underneath this hood, but actually the machine itself. The way that resin printing is accomplished is by pushing light upwards through a screen, and that's going to generate some heat. This venting system is entirely to handle that. It pulls the heat away from the system and away from that screen, and that's going to extend the life of your overall device and hopefully keep your screen running longer. So now let's crack open this hood and see what's inside. One of the first things that I noticed that's different from the Jupiter is this primary screw. So this screw here is much thicker on the Jupiter, and this is more in line with what you see on the Saturn II or the Saturn III. Now, that's not really a big deal. These don't weigh a ton of weight. This plate is not actually that heavy. So what's important though is to maintain it. And being able to access it and oil that is really important for your maintenance, but that's really one of the primary differences is that screw. I'm sure there's a cost benefit to going with a smaller screw like that, but that's gonna be your primary moving mechanism for your plate. The next thing I noticed is actually this resin tray itself. Now there's integrated grip holes here. It's much better than putting your fingers underneath. You really don't want to touch this if you can at all avoid it. But now you can actually grab it from the sides like that and not touch anything. So that's really a great thing. Something just I noticed as I unpacked this thing, make sure you clean. So this is all from the packing material. You don't need this in your resin. Make sure you get all this stuff off of your device, and especially off of this FEP before you do any printing. Now my next piece of advice, we're gonna move that. Sound is bouncing off of that. My next piece of advice is actually to do with the screen. Now this resin vat and FEP has been sitting on top of this screen, and it does have a screen protector sitting on top of it that you'll remove before you do any printing. But it's amazing how many scuffs are already on that screen. So one of the things that I plan to do very shortly is get a screen protector for this. It takes just a second for you to ruin that screen or get resin on there, and then you're fighting with that. And you're always worried if your next print's gonna have a bubble or something weird in there because you have a scratch or some sort of defect on your screen. The screen is not the cheap part to replace. So make sure you spend a little bit of money, get yourself a screen protector, save yourself a lot of headache. There was one feature that I was hoping would make it to the Jupiter SE that's just not here. It's not a huge deal, but there is a USB port on the side, and that's how you're gonna get your files into the system. I was hoping that you'd be able to hook it up to Wi-Fi. I don't know if there's just concerns that people might have unstable Wi-Fi and that might cause their file to drop. But once again, we don't have Wi-Fi on these kind of prosumer level printers. On the Saturn II, there was a way to convert it to have Wi-Fi. I have the chip, but I'm gonna be honest, I've not disassembled it and actually put it in. But it would be nice to be able to just send files directly from my machine to my printer and have it print. especially since those are in two separate rooms, my computer and my printer. But I mean, it's not really a huge inconvenience to have to put them on a thumb drive. They do include a thumb drive. A lot of people will swear by throwing those away and getting a really high quality thumb drive. I've not had a single problem with the thumb drive that came with my Saturn II, and I've been using it for years. I can't say the same for my Neptune. That had problems immediately. So that got replaced with a SanDisk micro SD card almost instantly. So your mileage may vary, but it's nice that they do include one. The files aren't very big, so you don't really need a huge drive, and you're certainly not going to be storing them there. So just keep in mind that it does have to read off of that several thousand times per print. So you might consider, at least keeping it in your wish list to grab a replacement at some point. The last thing I want to point out before we get everything fully assembled and moved into my print room is the build quality. So the Jupiter, the full-size Jupiter was a monster. It was over 40 pounds and it had integrated handles underneath to lift it. It's just a monster, complete monster. This thing is much more slim and compact without losing any of the features and without, well, I guess the troublesome glass issues that people had with the kind of barn door in the front. This is all metal, so there's definitely a sturdiness to this overall device. I mean, just look at these screws to lock down the lock down the resin vat. That's going to tell you everything you need to know. This thing is a huge step above things like the Saturn III. I'm eager to see what the print quality looks like. We are going to do some comparisons. I don't have a Saturn III, I have a Saturn II, but I'm going to print on that Saturn II. So we're going to be comparing two different resolutions and seeing if we can really see the difference. But for now, let's head into our printing space and get started. This is an area of GamingTrend that I've really not gotten to show you, and that is our 3D printing space. Now, a few of our editors have FDM printers, but as you can see, I focus on resin, though I also do have FDM. Today we're going to be taking a look at the comparison between the Saturn II over on the left and of course the Jupiter SE that we just unboxed. So let's get in a little bit closer and take a closer look at the features that we saw in the unboxing. Obviously the first thing you notice is the size difference. The Elegoo Saturn II is a fairly large build volume, but does not in any way compare to this Jupiter SE. We're going to go ahead and open the lid on both and take a look at the build volume on both, at least in terms of plate size. Now, rather than clear down and pull my plate, I went ahead and pulled out a spare vat. This is one that has a bit of damage here in the FEP, so I'm going to change this, but in the meantime, one, I'm going to assume it's infected, so gloves, of course, but it also gives us a good side-by-side comparison with the two FEPs. I mean, look at the build volume difference between those two. That's going to be able to print a full-size helmet, I think. We're going to have to find out, as well as a number of other really large statues that I've been looking to build for quite some time. So we're going to get this back in place. Getting a closer look, there are a number of features I want to point out. I've already gone ahead and set these 4 screws. That is how you level the plate. There's a whole process on the Elegoo site for the full-size Jupiter, and it works the same way for the Jupiter SE, but in short, you'll loosen this, loosen these 4 screws so everything's loose. There's a card. I mentioned that I use 2 slips of paper instead, but you put that card or this paper inside here, lower this down, and set it for 0 with this loose, lock everything down, comes back up, and you're ready to go. Follow the procedure that's on the website and you shouldn't go wrong. There's another feature that I pointed out while we were unboxing, and that's this device here. So these, I removed the sticker on accident. These little probes are what tell the device here whether there's enough resin inside to complete your print. And there's 2 little arms back here that tell it whether the tray's in place. When these detect that it's low on resin, it will use this tube here to fill this portion down here, and it does so from this device right here. So this connects into the back of this box, and there's a tube and a return tube right here. This allows the device to both fill and also empty using this standard Elegoo, Elegoo black. So we're using just standard 2.0 resin. This is not some crazy like 8K resin, it's just normal standard resin. So now it's just connected to the back here, and when we fire everything up, it's gonna start making a bunch of noise. We have a power light and a run light. Everything's powering up. And then we can take a closer look at the new prompts inside the system. There's not a great deal new under the sun. Print is still print, you'll get your files. USB port here on the side, as we mentioned. System, on the other hand, has feeding settings and auto recycle. So that's gonna be both fill and empty this. The rest of the tools, precisely the same. Exposure, tank cleaning, set 0. Manual movement, there is a slight change there. The manual movement, you can now move this up 50 millimeters at a time. Specifically with the Saturn II, you could only move it up 10 millimeters at a time. This is a very large printer. I wouldn't want to move this 10 millimeters at a time. So nice that it has 50. You can very quickly get the plate out of the way and let you move into getting your plate removed and your object ready for removal from the plate. So I have never done this. This is going to be interesting. We're going to go into tools. We're going to go into system, and we're going to fill this tank. Well, how about that? Now I've got a message that says the bottle is empty. I completely drained this bottle. That will hold more than an entire bottle for build volume. Now in this case, I know that the device, the statue is not a full bottle's worth, so I am going to tell it to go ahead and force print and let it get to work. We hear those fans kick off in the back, so that's keeping things cool. This should come down, we should hear a slight pop of the FEP, and this should get to work. Fingers crossed. Just like that. The print time on this particular statue is 24.5 hours. So I guess we're gonna do a little pause montage action. I'm gonna try and get my other smaller camera to do some time lapse. We'll see how that goes. But for now, be right back. It's hard to believe that this isn't as bad of a first result as it might look. Yeah, we've got this split head thing going on, so I'm just gonna remove that. But you can start to see, you know, we had some decent hair going on there for a minute, and you can see we were already starting to see some really great detail in the dress, ignoring the little bit of support residue. Nice smooth surface for the remainder of the dress. Then this, you know, you've got a great deal of detail in there, and then something happened, and we have some serious shift going on here. It starts to look a little bit more like a horror show. After that, you know, the waist shifted off completely, so you know, now she's more of a monster than Zelda. But yeah, this is actually not as bad as you might think. We've got a great amount of detail in all the parts that should have detail, and then just layer shifts. So this is not a failure insofar as it did manage to print the entire thing, did not fail despite these layer shifts. What I do need to do is go back, print a few more cones of calibration. There's a new cones of calibration from the table flip team that I'm gonna grab. That should help me dial in my settings a little bit better. And I think I wanna actually go bigger than this. I think I wanna print this in smaller pieces and just go even bigger. So I'm gonna reset, print some cones. I am gonna switch from black to gray because this, I printed it solid and that did take almost a bottle to do. So I'm frankly out of black. I don't typically print in black, I print in gray, but I've got some nice Elegoo gray that I'll switch to, get reset, and then we'll come back and take a look and see what the results are with that Elegoo gray and see if we can get a Princess Zelda that doesn't look like maybe she came from The Last of Us. So after about a month of calibration and testing, I managed to pull out some really good prints, but I want to show where I started and where I ended. So this is Princess Zelda, printed in a carbon black, and I swear it's not a necromorph from Dead Space. Kind of looks like it, especially when you see that her head detaches. There's all sorts of flats from lack of support. There's layer shift everywhere. She has a weird claw coming off of this part here. She has a claw back here and another one over here. You can see where the dress layer shifted completely. A lot of this comes from suction, where this is printed as one solid piece and as a solid piece. There's no hollowing or anything like that. And put simply, I think the weight of the print and also just a lack of calibration led to this horrific print. So it was back to the Ameritown Labs print town and also the V2 of the cones of calibration from the Table Foundry folks. And then ultimately the version 3 that just came out, which has like a skull and a sword, has the cones as well, but it has a number of indicators that are more indicative of what would cause this sort of thing. So back to calibration, I was able to then move over to this samurai here, and we got a little bit closer. So this is printed as a single piece, just like Zelda here, but hollow. You can see there were a number of supports that just were kind of mangled. I could have removed those, but it does indicate, these are not normal supports. They were laid flat in a strange way. And then you can see his hand here became completely flat. The sword got very elongated. A couple of pieces snapped off, like this part of the helmet. There was also a front piece, like this rear piece, that snapped when I was taking off the supports. Just not a successful print. If I had been more careful, maybe I could have salvaged some of it, but I knew, especially with this and what's going on in the back of the arm, that this just wasn't salvageable. So I'm gonna use this for practice for doing a little bit of airbrushing, but what I could see though, is just the level of detail and intricacy of a print like this. Again, this is my second print, so I was able to see on his armor, there's a great deal of the barding, and you can see the individual fingers and the bones on the fingers because it's a skeleton. On his armor itself, you can see just all the straps and cloth, and it's just an amazingly detailed print. So I wanted to go back and print Princess Zelda. So my next attempt, after again another trip to calibration land, is this one. So as you can see, Princess Zelda here is flawless. So this piece, I want to paint this Zelda, so I don't want to attach this piece until I've painted, but it does go on the front here, on the front of her dress like so. But as you can see, there isn't a single challenge here whatsoever. It printed flawlessly, all of the detail in her hands, her face, the dress itself, all these pieces look absolutely flawless. There's still a little bit of finish work to do, a little bit of sanding here and there for supports, but this is printed as one solid piece as well. I wanted to do this, but better. And I think I accomplished that. Now I knew that there was some slight tweaks that I wanted to make, and I also wanted to go back to where I originally started. She's printed hollow, but I wanted to go back, can I print a solid piece, and can I print something that maximizes the entire build volume of the Jupiter SE? I knew I could get away with something like this on my Saturn II. It will fit something this size, just barely, maybe. But I wanted to print something as big as I could go. So I turned to another lady, Minthara from Baldur's Gate 3. Now this is print in 3 separate pieces. You've got The bear head here, if you've not played the game, I don't want to ruin it and tell you who that belongs to. We have the plinth, but Minthara here is one solid piece. She's not hollowed out in any way, and so are the other pieces as well. So this is a heavy piece, and it is built to last. So this is going to get painted and glued together, but the level of detail is exquisite. Her armor is meant to be an elven armor, and it's got like all sorts of veining in the leaves. And when you get a closer look at this, you'll see it is perfect from top to bottom, and it represents the full build height, the full 300 millimeters of the capabilities of the Jupiter SE. This is what's possible with a bit of calibration and a little bit of patience. Obviously, it's a bit of resin and some work to get there, but this does represent what you can do if you take your time. To sum things up a bit, the Jupiter SE is a marked improvement over the original Jupiter. Not just the price is significantly less, dropping from around 1,500 MSRP all the way down to 700 at current sale price. But not just that, there are a number of improvements that make all of this possible. A new cooling system in the back allows the screen to remain cooler, which should allow it to last longer. It uses a reflection system instead of a direct light now, so it bounces off of a mirror and up onto the screen. That also should allow the screen to last a lot longer. It also means that if you do have an accident, and let's face it, it's going to happen eventually, you're not having resin drop directly on the screen surface. You should still use a screen protector. There's also improvements with the system for delivering resin automatically. It used to be that it was built directly into the into the tray, and it had like a sort of a trough system that you had to screw your resin bottle into. Now that's been replaced with a automatic feeding system. So those tubes come out of the system, so you can have the bottle outside of the cage, and it will feed into the system. But not only will it fill it, it will also empty it. Which is great for being able to change if you want to move from a black resin to a light resin to a darker resin. All of that's possible very quickly as you're able to pull most of the resin out, then tilt it up and kind of spoon the rest into that tube and allow it to all come out. It makes swapping these things out a breeze. It also means that that tray is a lot easier to handle for cleaning. Also in service of that cleaning, they've moved away from the cage style that had the glass door and moved back to the signature red case that goes on top. That means you can pull the whole thing out, which is much easier for getting these large scale prints out instead of having to pull them out a door and take the risk of hitting the top of the cage. It also means, again, that cleaning is much simpler because you're able to remove everything and you can get access to the very back edges of all of the device without having to worry about trying to, get into the back of something that you can barely see. The other problem that the original Jupiter had was light ingress. People were complaining that they would have partially cured resin inside their tray, or that they had partially cured prints that messed up the entire print. That is no longer a problem. The red plastic or red acrylic that they use doesn't let any light in that causes this sort of curing problems. So that's a good thing as well. They also included some little handles, so you can screw those directly in and you can take off that large printer top really easily, just like you can with their previous models. All of that is in service of also making the device smaller. So it's lighter and much easier to move. If you need to move the thing around or you have it on top of something that can roll, now it's much easier to do that. It's also nicer, again, if you need to tear down and you need to move everything, it's much lighter to do that. It was really a two-person carry for the original Jupiter. So now we're back to something that somebody can carry pretty easily. So all of that combined, they've also expanded the warranty. The original warranty on the screen for the Jupiter was just 3 months and 12 months for the device. And now it's 12 months for the device and 6 months for the screen. So even just in the extension of the warranty, Elegoo is showing that they have more faith in the device than they did before. So good on them. They certainly didn't have to do that. They could have stuck with what they had, but they've decided to make it better for everyone. I'll take it. It'd be nicer to see a longer warranty on that, but what can you do? On the con side, there are things that I can do like this on my Saturn II that I can practically throw in the defaults and have it print. So as far as a novice printer, those smaller printers are much easier to calibrate. I didn't even calibrate my original when I first got it. I threw in the USB and started printing. So you can't do that with the Jupiter SE. It's going to require work to dial it in, but there's no possible way that I could pull off these sorts of things at this height on that Jupiter SE. Or more importantly, being able to print larger than this. All of these were printed to show the maximized height of what you can do in a single shot. But printing things like this are possible on that larger printer because you can print these larger pieces without having to slice it. So if I wanted to replicate any of these large scale things you see behind me, I could do so. I just have to scale up the printer or the print file in something like Chi2Box or Lychee Slicer and just print larger pieces separately and then assemble them. The downside, of course, being you got to know how to assemble those things, and it takes some skill to be able to do that as well. So there's a learning curve no matter what, but I would say that the learning curve for the larger printers certainly is higher. I would encourage you, if you are going to pick up something like the Jupiter SE, to go to a place like Table Flip Foundry and join that community. There's an amazing group of people there. They're not sponsoring this in any way. They're just good friends. And they know a lot about printing, not just PLA, but also resin. So they can guide you if you are stuck, if you're a novice, or if you just run into weird necromorph prints like this. They can help guide you on what settings you might change to come out with something more suitable. So take the time to join a community and learn the craft. You'll save a lot of resin in the process. So would I recommend the Jupiter SE? Absolutely. At $700, it's a little bit more expensive than you might think you want to spend, but it's kind of hard to argue with this when something like this costs $600 and something like that just continues to go up in price. Being able to print something like those things at home with files that you can get from someplace like Gambati, it's hard to argue with that. So if you want to make really cool sculptures at really large sizes, you really can't go wrong. I'm Ron Burke, Editor-in-Chief for GamingTrend.com. Let me know in the comments, do you 3D print? Have you ever done resin printing? What challenges did you face? Thanks for watching. We'll see you again very soon.